Good morning, folks. It's Dennis from Aspen Thicket Grouse Dogs, and here's to a happy new year 2022. We made it through COVID. I'd just like to talk a little bit this morning about some things that we're going to kind of try and do with the YouTube channel this year. I think I mention this every year, but then we get caught up in things and don't necessarily get it all accomplished, but hopefully this year we're gonna strap the GoPro on and do a little bit more of in the woods training. I know you've seen a lot of the yard training stuff we do here with the dogs to prep them, but I'd like to advance that a little bit and show you some of the stuff that we do in the woods when we actually work on wild birds. And I also like to do a little bit more tips and tricks per se this year in kind of catering to the newer or the younger grouse hunter that's getting into the sport. And so that's where I'm going to go today. Today we're going to talk about choke tubes and guns for the kind of the beginning grouse hunter. So, you know, if you're going to get into grouse hunting and you're looking at purchasing a gun, first thing I can tell you to do is find one to borrow if you can. There's nothing wrong with an old pump gun. I've hunted with those for years, and there's nothing wrong with an entry-level gun as long as it fits you. 20 gauge is probably a really safe bet for these birds. Although I used to say that 20 gauge ammo was relatively easy to get your hands on. Seems like there's kind of been a run on most ammo nowadays. But anyhow, you know, a beginning gun, it doesn't really matter per se whether you get an over and under, side by side, pump, single shot, whatnot, because they can be very versatile thanks to modern choke tubes. And what a choke tube is something that you screw into the end of the barrel, and it has it places a constriction on the end of your barrel, so then it helps determine the pattern of your shot, which is basically, let's call it the spread, right? So these little constricting tubes that they have basically form the shot into a certain pattern. So it'll either be a very tight pattern that will have a better impact further away from you, or it'll open it up to a very open pattern of your BBs that will be more effective for closer in shots. So these basically, if you buy a newer gun, say a pump gun like Mossberg 500, right? One of the most widely purchased pump shotguns. They're readily available, they're cheap, you can use them on birds, versatile ducks, whatever. They'll come with a set of choke tubes, and you will have to kind of interpret those, right? So typically they come with 3 sets of choke tubes that I'm familiar with when you buy them, right? You're going to get an improved cylinder, a modified, and a full choke, okay? It's typically what they come with. Now you can buy more later on, but let's just explain those 3. Your improved cylinder is the one that is more wide open, okay? Your modified is one that is in the middle, and your full choke is the one that you're going to use if you're shooting further away. Full choke is generally reserved for ducks, so let's pick that and throw it out of the equation, okay? That leaves you with improved cylinder and modified. Now what you need to do is you need to take your gun, try out both of those chokes on a pattern board to see where your pattern is at, and do it from 20 yards, 20 to 30 yards, and see where your pattern's at. That'll give you a pretty good idea of where you can be at. Generally, when I used to hunt with the pump gun, I was always improved cylinder. So I had pointing dogs. Dogs are point, birds are a little bit closer, they get up and go. However, if you are hunting with a single shotgun, then you may want to consider perhaps going to a modified choke, because then you'll be able to have a second shot. But just going to have to pattern those and see where they're at. But again, these are your choke tubes. And little thing to note, if there's no writing on the side of them, they have notches on the top. The more notches that are on the top, the more wide open the choke is. The fewer notches on the top, the more constricted and tight it is. So for instance, this improved cylinder one has 4 notches on the top. If you were to take a full one, it'll only have 1 notch on the top. They come with little wrenches. There's tons of other YouTube videos that are probably better than mine to talk, that show you how to pattern shotguns and all that other stuff. But really, that's just, a little bit of what I wanted to talk about is, getting you started. If you get a gun this year, think about the choke tubes that come with it. And you're going to have 3, basically, they're going to come with it. Improved cylinder, modified, and full. Now, you can buy aftermarket choke tubes, and there's companies like Briley, Browning, others that have aftermarket choke tubes. The Browning and Vector Plus ones are pretty nice. All you have to do is check with the gun that you buy is able to have the same threading to be able to accept those choke tubes. And then you can get into the various worlds of cylinder, which is as wide open as you can get. And skeet, modified skeet, skeet 1, skeet 2. It gets pretty complicated. But you can do some research and monkey around with those. And again, it's your research once you use these choke tubes is going to come down to you actually taking the load of shell and size of pellet, your shotgun shells, and testing them with these choke tubes on a pattern board to see, what your optimal one is going to be. For me, in my side-by-side, I shoot cylinder and skeet 1 through majority of the season because it patterns well with my gun, and my dogs are generally, doing really good on the birds. I don't get a lot of wild flushes. They're pinning them down. So a lot of the shots are about as predictable as you could get for grouse hunting. If you're going to get into, when we get into, say, November, December, birds are a little more spooky. They might flush from a little further out. You get some wilder flushing birds, then maybe you can go to a skeet and modified. But, that's generally if you go out on the prairies to shoot, skeet and modified is a good option. But anyhow, that's my little intro on this. So hopefully we will tune in for the rest of the year for some good tips and whatnot. And, we'll get going as soon as the snow lets out. We're looking at snowing here today, and it's April 2nd, so it's not an April Fool's Day joke. So anyhow, cheers, and thank you for tuning in.